My name is Constance, and those who have fallen to my charms call me the Dahlia. Don't be afraid. Come with me.
Constance the Dahlia, the elusive child of Duke Inferno, follower of the Remembrance and the Destruction. What mysteries does she hold in store? In this video, let us unravel the secrets of Honkai Star Rail's newest unit and see whether her kit is the missing piece to bring Break back into the meta. Constance is a Fire Nihility Break support and is here to redefine the archetype. Her kit is pretty dang loaded and has a bunch of amazing features. Her main mechanic is her zone, which increases team-wide weakness break efficiency by 50% while enabling toughness reducing attacks to be converted to super break damage even when the enemy is not weakness broken. This lasts 3 turns and is refreshed with her skill. Constance's talent designates the ally that entered combat, or the one with the highest break effect, as the dance partner, allowing herself and the partner to trigger 60% super break damage. After that ally attacks, she launches a follow-up bounce attack on the enemy once per turn. What's more, her ultimate inflicts 18% def down while implanting fire and the dance partner's elemental weakness for 4 turns. Pretty crazy, and this should get you very close to the 100% def shred mark. Now onto her traces. Trace 1 increases the team's break effect by 24% of Constance's break stat plus 50%, though this only lasts for 1 turn at first and needs to be refreshed with healing or shielding, lasting 3 turns after that. Trace 2 recovers 1 skill point after every 2 follow-up attacks, while Trace 3 grants a 30% speed buff to any ally implanting weaknesses, dealing additional toughness reduction and regenerating energy for fire characters, including herself, lasting 2 turns. Finally, her signature light cone increases her own break effect, enables dance partners to deal break damage, a rare and undiluted multiplier, as well as restoring 1 skill point after her ultimate for quality of life. Constance is a very straightforward unit to build. All she really needs is break effect and speed. Thankfully, no effect hit rate is needed. Higher break effect translates to higher team buffs, assuming you're running sustain, and higher speed allows for more frequent follow-up attacks, more SP generation, and more overall toughness reduction. Keep in mind, Constance also benefits from her Trace's speed buff and can reach a whopping 156 speed in combat using speed boots without any substats, though uptime isn't permanent. Focus on reaching the desired speed breakpoint first, then go all in on break effect. Achieving 160 speed outside combat is not especially difficult. 200 to 250% break effect outside combat is a good range to aim for, or around 300% break effect in battle with other teammates, which, assuming 300%, boosts team-wide break effect by staggering 122%. For her main stats, go for speed boots and a break effect rope, while fishing for the same stats on other pieces. While the body and orb should be defensive for better survivability, Constance may need an EHR chest depending on the choice of light cone to reliably apply debuffs. This is of course suboptimal, as she will be frailer defensively, and rolling for effect hit rate substats will replace more valuable break or speed rolls. Though she will always want to use a break rope, I will mention the possibility of using an energy regeneration rope for players wanting to maintain uptime on the speed buff or for faster toughness reduction, though this is tricky and requires a lot of RNG. This would work best with a full Eagle ERR planar tutorial build, but is very niche and not especially potent. Now onto her light cones. First up, her signature Never Forget Her Flame. This grants Constance 60% break effect and 1 SP after implanting a weakness during her ultimate. More importantly, this light cone enables break damage, which is so far only present on Fugue's E4 and the new BP Harmony cone. Constance and your DPS will be able to deal 32% break damage, essentially translating into a 32% damage increase. This is an excellent vertical investment option and a very high value pick. As for other premium options, Fugues and Cyphers are pretty decent. Fugue's Long Road Leads Home is functionally very similar, granting the wearer the same 60% break effect as well as inflicting 32% break vulnerability debuff on enemies, though this requires 67% EHR to reliably apply. An overall very decent cone on paper, as it is tailor-made for a break support, but is suboptimal in practice given the added build requirements. Plus, if you already have Fugue, just keep this on her. The other option, Lies Dance on the Breeze, suffers from the same problem. It offers 18% speed and 24% defense down, which while strong, isn't too valuable, especially on invested break teams. Constance doesn't need that much speed, and Def Shred can get oversaturated. The cone's full effects also require 39% EHR and 170 speed to activate, and is more suitable for Fugue regardless. Though, if you manage to build that amount of speed on Constance outside combat, she can pretty much read 200 speed after her trace buff, which isn't bad at all. For free-to-play players, Solitary Healing is the most suitable pick. It offers a decent 40% break effect at S5 and serves as a pure stat tick, though should see some solid performance in Pure Fiction. Other free-to-play or 4-star light cones experience the same issue as her 5-star alternatives, needing to build EHR. While Constance can definitely equip cones such as 𝓒𝓷𝓷𝓼𝓽𝓮 Escapade or Resolution Shines as Pearls of Sweat, these require 67% EHR to reliably inflict debuffs, making Constance squishier and harder to build. Lastly, I will mention the specialist build using before the tutorial mission starts, which can be paired with an ERR rope in Relics, but this is once again suboptimal. With a 4-turn debuff duration and low damage output, Constance's ultimate does not need to be frequently refreshed, and you would be better off using a break effect or a debuffing cone instead, as it will directly translate to higher team damage. Now for Relics, break units are pretty simple. Iron Cavalry is the go-to set, even for supports. This offers 16% break effect and 25% def ignore, the strongest option for Constance's personal damage. It's also very efficient to farm for the whole team. An alternative option is the Thief of Shooting Meteor set, which grants a higher 32% break effect and some energy after breaking. You could squeeze a slightly higher amount of break effect from this, but the energy gain is rather negligible, and you don't want Constance to be stealing breaks anyways. It's also an older cavern with much lower farming efficiency than Iron Cavalry, so only consider this set if you already have good pieces lying around. Lastly, you can also opt for a 2-piece break combo, which will give the same 32% break effect, only without the energy gain. This will serve as a pure break effect stat tick, and should only be used as a placeholder until you have a full 4-piece set. Again, I'll mention the possibility of using the good ol' Eagle set, which can work, but just isn't as potent on Constance compared to other support units, especially Harmony MC and Fugue, given the lack of noteworthy damage output and effects tied to her ultimate. Planars are also very straightforward. Thanks to her ultimate, enemies will almost always be fire weak except in Pure Fiction or in odd scenarios, making the Forge set the strongest option, not just for Constance but for all break units, offering a very solid 6% speed and 40% break effect. In second place, we have Thalia, granting 36% break effect, which is a decent option but will always fall short of 𝓒𝓷𝓷𝓬𝓮 in terms of raw buffs. For a supportive or ult spam build, you could consider something like 𝓒𝓸𝓷𝓼𝓽𝓮 or 𝓒𝓏𝓏 for slightly faster ramp up, but this is once again suboptimal. Now onto team compositions. On top of providing excellent break effect buffs, Constance's ability to front-load break damage, which was previously mechanically impossible, is a massive game changer for the archetype. The team-wide weakness break efficiency and AoE weakness implant greatly increases breaking speed, enabling faster clears, while her SB generation allows for much smoother gameplay, especially in teams with lower investment. Constance brings the most benefit to Firefly, who can greatly capitalize on the added super break multiplier, speed boost, and tailor-made energy regeneration. The last one is especially important as Firefly now spends much less time in her non-enhanced state, and can typically get her ultimate back up in one attack, no more drawn-out downtime. She now also gets access to new speed breakpoints, which can allow her to squeeze in more attacks. Out of combat, she'll want 178.4 speed, or 162.4 with 1 Dance 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 or E2 Fugue proc, or 146.4 with 2 procs. Dropping some break effect for speed substats is not a big deal, and should be considered to dish out the most damage possible. Boothill also benefits from Constance's speed boost, making 200 in-combat speed more accessible, though uptime will be challenging to maintain due to the buff's 2-turn duration, even with Fugue and the Eagle set. Though he usually runs at 160 speed, the extra 30% doesn't actually help him reach the next breakpoint. This means his speed should be optimized to meet breakpoints with and without Constance's buff, ideally 169 pre-buff to reach the 200 mark. Regardless of whether achieving this is feasible for your Boothill, this boost will make him easier to build overall. Just try to match the unbuffed and buff speed with a breakpoint. I'm just a little annoyed that the buff doesn't last 3 turns. For our Erudition units, though Rappa and Himeko cannot benefit from the speed buff, their performance is nonetheless sure to see a huge increase, especially in Pure Fiction. Both units greatly appreciate the AoE weakness implant, weakness break efficiency, and frequent toughness reduction. Lastly, I'll also mention Silverwolf and Anaxa as beneficiaries of the speed boost. The two don't really slot into break teams, but could make for fun partners, especially for APOC Shadow shenanigans, but don't consider this in serious play. Now, how does Constance slot in with our plethora of break supports, and who does she replace? Well, there's no definitive answer as she synergizes excellently with all 3, and because the pairing can be changed depending on the DPS partner and enemy. However, Ranmei is the weakest link in most cases, save for some APOC Shadow matchups, as she isn't a dedicated break support like Fugue and Harmony MC are. While 𝓒𝓸𝓷𝓼𝓽𝓮 will prefer Fugue, especially with Eidolons, Firefly may be better off with Harmony MC due to the stronger Super Break multiplier and access to DDD. Of course, if you don't have Fugue or cannot free up the 𝓒𝓸𝓷𝓼𝓽𝓮, Ranmei is still a perfectly viable unit for your break teams, with her free E1 being a great option too. Finishing up with our sustains, Constance's Traces actually incentivizes, or rather bridges the gap, between sustainless and traditional team comps with 𝓒𝓸𝓷𝓼𝓽𝓮 or 𝓒𝓸𝓷𝓼𝓽𝓮. While Break struggled to clear quickly with these units in version 3, this buff offsets a decent chunk of the damage loss, making these teams much comfier to run. Of course, sustainless teams will still clear faster, but hey, at least DPS 𝓒𝓸𝓷𝓼𝓽𝓮 gets a nice boost. So, the optimal team now looks something like this. The traditional team with your Break DPS, Constance, Fugue, and 𝓒𝓸𝓷𝓼𝓽𝓮. For sustainless, swap out 𝓒𝓸𝓷𝓼𝓽𝓮 for one of the other Break supports. Just pick whatever works best. Finally, let's go over an Eidolon review to wrap up. E1 is an extremely potent Eidolon, granting the 60% Super Break multiplier to all allies and increasing its amount to 100% for herself and the dance partner. Constance can also deal 25% toughness reduction to an enemy one time after it is attacked by the dance partner. This Eidolon is very strong for team-wide damage and great for shredding toughness, which is likely to scale well in the future as toughness bars continue to inflate. Her E2 allows the ultimate to additionally reduce 20% all-attack res, with both debuffs immediately applied to an enemy once they enter battle. This is a strong, undiluted debuff, essentially replacing Ranmei's ultimate effect with virtually permanent uptime. This is especially strong in Pure Fiction, though not a necessary pick. Constance's E4 allows her follow-up attack to inflict 12% vulnerability per instance up to 10 instances. Since this is balanced damage, the debuff amount depends on the number of enemies, but effectively translates to a whopping 120% vulnerability debuff in a single target scenario. Not bad for an E4. And finally, for her E6, Constance gains a massive 150% break effect self-buff, meaning 36% break effect for the team, and a team-wide 20% action advance after her follow-up attack. Assuming she's built fast, this will allow for some crazy high-frequency turn order manipulation. This may not do much in practice as you can't always control its timing, but seems very fun to play. Imagine E6 Dahlia, E2 Fugue, and HMC with DDD. The enemy won't ever get to make a move. Of course, this is just a luxury pick, so don't go pulling 7 copies for fun. In conclusion, Constance is a definitive upgrade for the Break archetype, especially for invested teams. Every buff she offers is invaluable and benefits all teammates, with her unique pre-break mechanic, weakness break efficiency, AoE weakness implant, defense shred, and SP positivity. In testing, this appears to almost double the archetype's performance regardless of the DPS. Building her is also pretty straightforward and stamina efficient, and not needing effect hit rate is a huge win. Both her E1 and S1 are extremely high value and are great options for vertical investment. As usual though, the easiest and more affordable will be grabbing the S1, as it is best in slot by a significant margin compared to other light cones. While Break has been in a rougher spot since version 3, it still performs decently given the right matchups and investment. Constance is a must-pull for any player wanting to continue running their Break teams. What's more, the archetype isn't all that expensive. It's best to already have a decently invested team or damage dealer, but with Dahlia, all other teammates are actually fairly accessible and free. Ranmei, Harmony MC, and 𝓒𝓸𝓷𝓼𝓽𝓮 are all solid options and should work fine. And for Firefly players, you don't even need Fugue to make her work, so just pull for Constance and you'll be good to go. So, the question everyone's been asking, is Break back? Well, yes and no. Yes, it's elevating Break to 3.x standards, and it's definitely a strong archetype with the right investment. Think Eidolons on your DPS and E1 or E2 Fugue. However, with 4.x around the corner, we can only assume that power creep will get even higher, making Break teams, along with other older archetypes, less relevant. This is unless they release new Break units to complement Constance, of course. Overall, I'm very satisfied with how Constance turned out. Though the idea of front-loading Break does go against the archetype's defining mechanic, which is something I'm not a huge fan of, I'm excited to see Break teams pop off again. She's kind of like the Kafka of Break. As a dedicated DOT and Break player and Nihility enthusiast, please save me. I cannot be happier. Let's just hope that the archetype will continue receiving upgrades, and I can't wait to see what they do with it next. Well, that's it folks, and I hope you enjoyed watching. Hopefully this guide was helpful and cleared up any confusion about her kit or pull value. Do watch out for this space, as I will keep updating the channel with more content. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments and I will do my best to respond with advice. Farewell for now, and may the Dahlia grace your accounts.